Lauri Turney, also known as Larry Thorne, was born in 1919 in what was then the Finnish city of Viipuri. Finland had gained independence from Russia less than 2 years earlier and had been in a bitter civil war between the Reds and the more conservative Whites. While the Whites had won, the divisions in Finnish society remained, and Lauri grew up in this segregated environment. Lauri's father had fought for the Whites and instilled in him a fierce dislike for communism that was to define his life. At the age of 19, Lauri Turney enlisted in the Finnish Army and was soon chosen for officer training because of his leadership potential. On November 26, 1939, at approximately 2:45 p.m, 7 artillery shells exploded near the small Soviet village of Manila, close to the Finnish border. Moscow immediately accused Finland of launching the attack. Finnish investigators quickly concluded that the shells had actually been fired from Soviet territory. The Soviet government dismissed Finland's findings, refused a joint investigation, and instead demanded that Finnish troops withdraw roughly 18 miles from the border. The growing crisis made it clear that war was now unavoidable. On November 30th, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland with overwhelming force. Nearly 460,000 soldiers, around 2,000 tanks, 2,000 artillery pieces, and about 800 aircraft crossed the border just as one of the harshest winters of the century settled over the region. Soviet leaders believed the campaign would be brief. Years later, Nikita Khrushchev admitted their confidence, recalling, "We thought one shot would be enough, and the Finns would surrender." Reality proved very different. During the opening 6 weeks of the Winter War, Turney's battalion fought fiercely while suffering surprisingly few casualties. Soviet armoured columns and supply convoys were forced to travel along narrow roads cutting through dense forests, making them vulnerable to Finnish tactics. Using roadblocks, ambushes, and carefully prepared traps, Finnish troops struck the front and rear of these long columns, trapping them with no easy path forward or back. Dressed in white camouflage and moving swiftly on skis, they disappeared into the forests, then reappeared to split the Soviet formations into isolated pockets. These encircled groups, known as motti, the Finnish word for a stack of cut firewood, became increasingly vulnerable as freezing temperatures, hunger, and relentless attacks wore them down. Finnish soldiers often targeted field kitchens first, knowing that denying the enemy warm food and morale could be just as devastating as bullets. During one of these motti operations near Pukitsanmäki, also called Sugarloaf Hill, Turney received orders to destroy a Soviet supply truck. The vehicle was protected by foxholes, while Soviet tanks patrolled nearby. Accompanied by 3 men, Turney silently advanced from a tree to tree through the snow-covered forest. Those who served beside him later noted that the greater the danger, the calmer he became. Reaching the truck without being detected, one soldier attached an explosive charge and armed the detonator. A sudden metallic click echoed through the silence, alerting nearby Soviet troops. Instantly, gunfire and grenades erupted from every direction. Despite the chaos, the Finns withdrew into the forest as the explosives destroyed the valuable supplies, completing their mission before the enemy could organize an effective pursuit. Although Finland won numerous tactical victories, its resources were limited and its forces were vastly outnumbered. The Soviet Union could continue replacing men and equipment on a scale Finland simply could not match. Even so, the Red Army paid an enormous price for every mile gained. The staggering losses ultimately convinced Joseph Stalin that continuing the campaign would cost more than it was worth. In March 1940, the Moscow Peace Treaty ended the Winter War. Finland was forced to surrender significant territory, including Turney's hometown of Viipuri, forcing approximately 420,000 Karelians to abandon their homes and relocate within Finland. In May 1941, as Germany secretly prepared Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, it entered into confidential discussions with Finland. Rather than becoming a formal Axis ally, Finland agreed to fight as a co-belligerent against the Soviet Union, while maintaining its own military objectives. Finnish volunteers were sent to Germany for specialised training, and Turney eagerly joined them. Following German military policy, the volunteers were temporarily assigned to the Waffen-SS for instruction. When Operation Barbarossa began on June 22nd, Finland waited 3 days before entering the conflict, marking the start of the continuation war. Turney soon returned home, determined to fight once again. Finnish forces rapidly reclaimed the territories lost during the Winter War, and eventually advanced beyond their former borders, carrying the war deeper into Soviet-held territory. Turney became a tank commander. On one operation, when his tank got stuck, he single-handedly detached the tank's machine gun, set up a defensive position in a ditch, and laid down fire while his crew escaped, and then resumed the attack on foot. By August 1941, the Finns were within 20 kilometers of Leningrad, blocking the northern route, with the Germans cutting off the last supply roads to the south. The 872-day siege of Leningrad had begun, which would decimate the city's inhabitants with hunger and disease. Larry was given command of a new company. Second Company became known as Turney Unit. They had a special arm patch with a T for Turney. These men, around 100 volunteers, formed a unit for deep reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, and anti-partisan operations. Tough men with special skills. They were so successful in their operations, the Soviets even put a bounty on Turney's head. In June 1944, a massive Soviet offensive began against the Finnish positions. Finland was fighting a battle it couldn't win, and by September was forced into a ceasefire agreement that meant giving up land, demobilizing the military, and paying reparations. A Soviet commission was set up in Helsinki that brought criminal trials against hundreds of Finnish officers for war crimes. The Finnish Communist Party was encouraged to enter the political arena, the revolution coming to Finland. As a civilian now, Turney was unemployable as an ex-member of the SS. Joining the underground resistance, he helped a number of Finns escape to Sweden, but eventually, on the 17th of January 1945, he and a small party left Finland for Germany on a secret U-boat. After briefly fighting on the Russian front with the war clearly at its end, he surrendered to the Americans using a false identity, was imprisoned by the British, but escaped after just 2 weeks and slipped back into Finland via Denmark. Becoming a civilian, Larry took a job working in an electrical shop. In 1946, at the age of 27, the Finnish police arrested him at the behest of the Soviets. He was found guilty and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He was pardoned on Christmas Eve 1948 after serving 3 years of his sentence. Slipping out of the country on a false passport, he finally made his way on a ship from Venezuela to America. Before the ship had docked in Alabama, Larry had dived over the edge, swam to shore, and illegally entered the United States. It was September 1950, and the Cold War was well underway. He changed his name to Larry Thorne. Although he preferred the hybrid pronunciation, Thorny, Larry had been living in the US for 3.5 years before winding up again in the military. He enlisted for the maximum 6 years, and as part of the deal, would receive US citizenship. At the age of 35, he was almost twice the age of the other recruits, but he breezed through boot camp and signed up for a 16-week cold weather training course at Camp Carlson. It was obvious that he was already supremely skilled in this regard, and so started his rapid rise through the ranks. He became part of the newly formed Special Forces and one of the elite new Green Berets. In 1964, Thorne and his Special Forces team volunteered to go to Vietnam. Upon arrival, he immediately took control of 300 guerrillas and trained them how to ambush and strike the Viet Cong. Jungle warfare was far from the frozen forests of Finland, but Thorne took to it with ease. The deputy commander of Special Forces in Vietnam wrote, "This is the type of person you like to have around in a fight, for he has unlimited courage. It was October 1965, and Turney was nearing the end of his second deployment in Vietnam. By then, he had been chosen for promotion to the rank of Major. On one mission, he was aboard one of 3 CH-34 helicopters flying at low altitude over the dense jungle near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Storm clouds were gathering, and worsening weather made conditions increasingly dangerous. Serving in the escort helicopter, Thorne was overseeing the successful insertion of special operations teams. 2 of the CH-34s touched down safely, allowing the teams to disembark without incident. But as Thorne's helicopter continued its flight, it suddenly disappeared into thick cloud cover. The other 2 helicopters turned back toward base, only to realize that all radio communication with Thorne's aircraft had been lost. Despite 56 search and rescue missions, no trace of the helicopter or its crew was ever found. A year later, in October 1966, the soldier who had served with distinction in 3 different armies was officially listed as dead. More than 3 decades later, in 1999, investigators finally located his remains. In 2003, Major Larry Thorne was laid to rest with full military honours at Arlington National Cemetery, remembered as an American hero whose extraordinary life spanned 3 nations and 3 wars. If you enjoyed this true story and want to see more documentaries like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing remarkable stories from history to life. Thank you for watching.